All right, so my name is Stephen. I'm one of the librarians here, and we have, of course, our wonderful panelists on my right, on your left, about to begin a discussion on the ascent of children's comics. But before we start, just a couple of brief housekeeping things. In the event of a fire alarm, please make your way out of the auditorium, exit the building via the Aitken Street entrance, turn left, go via the footpath across Guthrie Lane to outside building site 100 metres up the road, gather there and wait for further instructions from the staff. In the event of an earthquake, please immediately assume the brace position by leaning forward in your seat, placing your head on your lap and your hands over the back of your head. Once the shaking is stopped, please wait for instructions from library staff. This is one of the safest buildings in Wellington, so it's usually best to stay inside, but if the building is not safe, library staff will advise. In the event of any other alert or emergency, please stay calm and await instructions from the library staff. If we need to evacuate, there is an exit next to the lectern or through the doors that you entered in. All right, so with that all done with, Wellington City Libraries, in association with the National Library, is extremely excited to be hosting this panel discussion between some of New Zealand's sharpest comic minds on the topic of the ascent of children's comics. There are more comics and graphic novels being published for children and young adults now than at any other point in history. So joining us on stage today to help us unravel how the comic publishing industry for children has come to be at this point is Katie O'Neill, brought to us by the New Zealand Book Council. We've got Roger Langridge, sponsored by Creative New Zealand. We've got Giselle Clarkson from the Sapling. We've got Ant Sang, sponsored by Penguin Books. And the panel will be chaired by the mighty Sarah Laing, whose exquisite graphic memoir, Mansfield and Me, continues to leap from strength to strength both at home and overseas, recently being discussed in such illustrious publications as the Times Literary Review. So, there will be questions at the end. We just ask that you please wait for a staff member to approach you with a microphone before you ask the question. And the reason for that is that this is being recorded for a podcast, so we'd like to be able to hear the question as well as the answer. And also, after this event, there will be signings from our wonderful authors here outside the auditorium, so do stick around if you'd like to have anything signed. All right, without any further ado, I will hand over to Sarah.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's so great to be here. I cannot wave my microphone around. I am going to have to ask you to do something for me because I realise there's no clock in this room and I will need to know when 15 minutes before the end is the time so that you all have a chance to ask questions. So if anybody wants to wave furiously when it is 2:30, then please do. So that would be great. Sorry, 1:30. This is the thing. I don't have a clock. I rely entirely on my phone. I thought, no, I'll just leave my bag backstage here. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'll just tell you a little bit more about everybody we have on stage here. At the end, we've got Katie O'Neill, and I feel like, you know, that phrase, world famous in Paeroa, it kind of applies to Katie, except for in the inverse. She's not famous in Paeroa, but she's famous in the world. So everybody should know who she is. She has written wonderful books, including Princess and the Tea Dragon Society and Aquacorn Cove, and she's won Harvey and Eisner awards, and these are basically the Grammys or the Academies of the comics world. It's weird how not everybody knows about the comics world. I don't understand it. And she's nominated for her latest book, Aquacorn Cove. The cover is just up there. She has been nominated for another Eisner, so congratulations. That's amazing. And then, of course, we have Giselle Clarkson, and I love her comics on the Sapling, and they're always delightful and they're always funny. So you must, if you have not read them, you must go and read the back catalogue. Giselle shot to internet celebrity with her viral common household biscuits and slices infographic, which is now plastered across tea towels. And I think there's even like a mural. Is there a mural? No. Oh, okay. Fake news. Okay. And Roger Langridge here is a rare beast. He's actually made a career in comics, which means that he's actually made money from it. Admittedly, he had to leave the country in order to do so, but he has written for Marvel. He's written Thor comics. He's written Muppets comics. You'll find all of his Snarked books in the library. You'll find his Fred the Clown books in the library as well. He is also won multiple awards, and I think he's going to be talking more in length with Dylan Horrocks later on this afternoon, so you must all return and listen to a little bit more. And then of course we have Ant Sang, who's a stalwart of the New Zealand comics community. He shot to fame with his 2001 Dharma Punks, which is a bit of a cult classic, and I was like very uncool, and in 2001 I was not into comics, so I can't say that I bought all the mini comics, but I did buy the book when it came out in 2014, collected by From Earth's End Publishing. And he's also had a book award winning The Shaolin Burning, and his most recent book is Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas, which is a fantastic YA kind of post-apocalyptic or futuristic action graphic novel. Yeah. So do you guys agree with the whole premise of this panel, that there are more comic books for children now than there ever were? You have to pick up your microphone. Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, is it on? Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think we're just seeing because my publisher is based in the States, so I'm kind of more attuned to like American sales data, and just seeing like places like Scholastic, Random House Graphic just opened a graphic novel for young readers imprint, and it just seems to be just going up and up and up, and I think just because they appeal to such a wide range of readers, so reluctant readers as well as advanced readers, they can both kind of enjoy what graphic novels offer in terms of the mixture of sort of looking at, the context and the faces, and then the kind of the meaning, the layers of meaning behind it. And I think they're just super accessible, and I definitely see them becoming a lot more popular. And also just seeing we're seeing just so many more like adaptions of graphic novels, so I think that's also like putting a little bit more money behind them, because publishers can sort of see a longer game than maybe they used to. Yeah, I'm not sure if everyone else agrees.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Everything Katie said. I think maybe the quality has gone up too. I feel like there always have been comics for kids, but they're taken more seriously now, and they're just getting better and better, and possibly getting a little bit more literary, or being taken seriously as a thing for kids to read, because it's real reading and it counts, and it's not just you can't just disregard them as easily as people probably once did with comics for kids.
Yeah, I assume it's working. There always have been comics for children, but I think we've moved on from a time when all comics were automatically for children. So now we've got things that are being deliberately targeted for specific groups of children or particular age ranges, and that side of things has got a lot more sophisticated. So I think people are just more mindful now of a children's audience, a specific children's audience. I don't have a lot to add to what's already been said, to be honest. But
just building on what Roger was saying, it's kind of funny because when I started doing comics in the 1990s, doing mini comics, it was kind of a given that comics were kind of juvenile literature, and I kind of felt that we were all about comics aren't just for kids. Comics can be serious. Comics can be dark and gritty, and talk about adult stuff. So it's kind of funny that it's kind of come full circle now. It's kind of like comics can be for kids, I don't know what the point of that was. It's just kind of a cycle, I guess.
Do you, with your Dharma Punks, do people look at that and imagine that it's a comic for kids? And would you see that as perhaps a YA comic?
I didn't when I made it. Kelly from Earth's End Publishing, years and years ago, before they even well, I don't know, maybe he was plotting about doing the collected edition, but he said, I see Dharma Punks as a young adult book. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not a young adult. And I kind of felt slightly offended because I kind of didn't see it as young adult. But then when I've done the other two books, which have been published, Shell and Burning and Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas, originally they were not conceived as young adult either. But the publishers were really keen that they should be, and I think it was a natural fit. So I'm not sure what it is about me that I don't try and do young adult books, but they seem to be in that category. Maybe I've just arrested development or something, and I've just plateaued development.
I mean, I think it is something about the perception of comics, and Giselle was mentioning this as well, that many of your comics are actually drawn with an adult audience in mind. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it wasn't really until I looked at the blurb for this panel that I kind of thought, actually, I don't know if that's me, is it? I don't, because I was trying to pick out things to put on the slides. I was like, which of my comics actually are for children, and like specifically, and not many. Probably the educational ones I do are targeted at sort of a 10 to 12 kind of an age bracket, but pretty much everything else is for adults. And I don't usually use like naughty words or anything, so like kids can read them, but that's not who I actually have in mind. It's really for my peers. But I think style is one thing that makes people think that they are for a younger audience. I think if stuff is quite friendly looking, there's nothing gritty about what I do. So
perhaps it's something that the inherently accessible nature of comics makes it look like it can be appealing to any audience.
Yeah, especially too because I make comics about children and about children's books. I think that also blurs the line a bit more.
What about you, Katie? Do you write specifically with a children's audience in mind, or do you consider your comics to be all ages? Or
I definitely think all ages. Like, I always want children to be able to read my comics, so as Giselle said, like not using naughty words and kind of toning down certain themes. But overall, like, I think having a wide age range of characters. So I always have older people or adults who have also got their own thing going on in the story. So it's not just children characters. They'll kind of be like the focal point and like the main character. But if you add in different sort of, like with comics, it's very easy to make bring in layers that they can come back to maybe when they're older and come back and read the same book and notice something about it that they didn't see the first time, but when they read it when they were young, they still understood the story and enjoyed it for just the little tale that it was, and then coming back. And that's something I think is really lovely about comics.
Yeah, and you really play with that as well. I mean, you obviously, representation is really important in your comics, and you often have LGBT characters in there, and all sorts of nationalities as well. Can you talk a little bit about the role of that in your comics?
I just wanted to create worlds where that's just normal. That's just a natural part of having characters who are disabled, people of colour, queer people, just showing a good cross section and just having that be a natural part of things. Yeah, that's always really important to me.
And what is the response to that like?
It's been lovely. It's really nice getting parents being like, either this book helped us explain, like if it's from like a gay couple who are parents, and that helped us kind of explain to our child, or like just normalize it, make them feel like they also get stories and they get things that they get to relate to, and just in general people just being like very, very receptive. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Great. Roger, I was intrigued last night about you talking about, was it Snarked that you wrote that you had your children as a test audience? Which particular comic was it?
Well, I don't know about a test audience. I had them in mind, certainly. I sort of fell into doing children's comics without really sort of intending to. It's just sort of how people perceive my work and the sort of stuff I got hired to do, I guess. but around the time I did Snarked, my kids were pretty much at exactly the right age to enjoy it. And it was important to me to be, because I spent all this time up in my attic drawing comics. It was nice to actually have something that I was doing that I could show to them and they could be a part of. And I would do things for them in the comic. Like my daughter's name is hidden in one of the stories, and my son drew a picture in one of the panels in one of them. I suppose it was the most. It was a sort of a personal way into doing children's comics, I guess. Regardless of the fact that I was already perceived as a children's cartoonist, this was sort of me deliberately trying to be one.
How did you find that perception of you as a children's cartoonist, galling or grating, or in any way, or
Not really, because I grew up with. The comics I grew up with were written for a general audience, really. They were dismissed as children's literature, but they were written for anybody to read, essentially. And so that was kind of what I aspired to do. My heroes are like the newspaper strip cartoonists, and they were writing for adults, but they didn't have swearing or anything because they were doing it for the broadest possible audience. And that's kind of the approach that I always took. Those were my heroes, and that's kind of the kind of thing I wanted to do.
well, I suppose that might give you kind of a bit of power. You've kind of got this very accessible medium, which is, appealing to children, and you can probably put some quite dark and subversive messages or political ideas. Have you taken advantage of that at all?
I don't deliberately do dark stuff, but it sort of comes out anyway. I think my Fred the Clown comics, I wasn't considering them as a children's comic, but I deliberately didn't put swearing in them or nudity or anything like that. And I was quite happy for my kids to read them, but they were kind of bleak when you read them. They were, about sort of the essential doomedness of human relationships and stuff. It was, I don't think it totally destroyed my children. So I think I got away with it.
Yeah, I do want to know if your children have ever told you what they think of your comics.
Well, my son's wanting to be a cartoonist, so I obviously haven't totally put him off. My daughter, she doesn't give quite so much away. I think she's 16, so she's trying to be cool. I think her best friend really, really likes my comics, so I think I'm getting away with it. I think
I think that's definitely a compliment.
Yeah.
And you worked in your last book. You worked collaboratively with a writer, Michael Bennett, was it? Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
And how was that process?
It was really good because when you go into a collaboration, I hadn't worked with Michael before, so I was really nervous that it might turn out really badly and we might hate each other and not agree on anything. But it was Michael's an author and a screenwriter, and I was wondering what kind of writer he would be in terms of if every word had to stay and don't move a comma and nothing, don't touch the script. But he was so open to changing whatever was needing to be changed. He would just, sure, we can just change it scene completely. If I had an idea for some visuals or the way the scene might play out. So I really enjoyed that collaboration. It was great.
And how did you go about, because I know that it was originally intended for an adult audience and then you went and shifted it back to a more YA audience. How was that adjustment? Did you feel like you had to compromise your story or pull things back in any way?
No, I think there was more swearing in the original script, and there have been a few complaints that there's still too much swearing in it. That was the only thing really that we pulled back on. The theme of the story is still the same. I think actually it improved the story because we had to really think about the character. Originally, Helen, who's the protagonist, she was married and her marriage was kind of in ruins, and she was going through this married life crisis. And the publishers wanted us to make her a teenager. And I think it made us look at who Helen was and think about what it is that what her motivations for trying to save the world were. And I think it actually made it better, being, having to change those things around.
So would that be something that you and Michael discussed together, or did Michael kind of go away with the script and then return and say, this is the new version of Helen? I mean, how much being the artist as opposed to because normally you both write and draw. I mean, how
That's
much
right.
influence do you feel you have over the story as the artist part of the equation?
I couldn't go too far in trying to change the story. I had lots of ideas, and a lot of them were like, not so much, But in the way that the story was told, I had a lot of creative freedom, and in the whole look of the story, I had a lot of freedom to push that. But it was a very collaborative process. So I would give Michael rough sketches, and I'd say, what do you think about this? At one stage, I was thinking about shaving all the hair off Helen, but it looked a little bit like Charlize Theron and Mad Max 3, and it seemed a little bit derivative, so we didn't do that. But yeah, it was very, what do you think of this? And he would let me know, and back and forth. And same with the writing, it was very much, I would offer some ideas and we'd discuss them, and just go back and forth until we came to a conclusion. Yeah.
Oh, great. Katie, do you work with an editor internationally? I mean, you've got quite a book schedule ahead of you. It looks like you've got another book coming out quite soon, and how does that all work? It's still quite DIY here in New Zealand, so I'm kind of intrigued as to how the whole mechanisms of the international comics production works.
I think it would probably vary a lot from publisher to publisher, and when you're doing like a graphic novel, usually you kind of talk to your editor or your publisher about what's realistic for a delivery date, and because it's not a monthly serialized comic, there's a little bit more give in terms of when you have it done. Like there are certain, obviously you still have to then plan for this long for printing and this long for distribution and things, but overall it's been really nice to be able to say this is when I actually can get the artwork done without really straining myself or burning out. So that is, I've always felt like I can be really open with my editor. That might just be because it's a smaller publisher, so Only Press is still considered like an independent publisher. So we have like quite a good open discussion about what's a good boundary. So and my editor is really lovely, Ari Yarwood, and she's been my editor since Princess was first published, and it's been really nice to have that kind of someone to read through scripts and thumbnails and give improvements, but she's very supportive of all the themes and ideas and the characters and what I really want to achieve with these books. So I've never felt like I've had to change anything was really integral or felt like I'd changed it to be something that it wasn't. And so I think that's quite fortunate, because I know that's not always the case, but I think there are quite a few graphic novel publishers, the smaller houses especially, are very understanding of what the artist is trying to do. So that's been really, really lovely.
So would you sort of approach your editor or with a kind of an outline of a story? I mean, how would you go about? When exactly would you begin these discussions?
So for me, it started with so my webcomic Princess was already online, and that's when my editor found it and then emailed me, "Would you like to publish with us?" And I was very keen. And then from that, she was also like, "Hey, if you have any other ideas, feel free to send them through." So I sent through a few different pitches, and she really honed in on T-Dragons as probably having a lot of potential. So from there, I just did a pitch like you would normally do for any other graphic. And so I always do a pitch document, even if there's kind of an understanding. Say if I was doing another T-Dragons book, it's kind of an understanding that it would probably go ahead, but I'd still pitch it in the formal way, because I think that's a really good way to make sure I know what the book's about, they know what the book's about. It's actually got a purpose and it's got a structure. I'll start with like a pitch document that gets taken to the editorial team. They approve or not approve or make changes to like maybe the audience, or maybe suggest like, having this element is going to make it a little bit sort of more adult, or like, maybe it's not going to, like, you're kind of trying to do too many things, maybe just tone it back to really focusing on what's important. And then just kind of proceeds like a graphic novel. We set out the schedule, and yeah, it's very collaborative with Only Press because they're a bit smaller. So,
And your work is beautiful. I assume you make it all digitally.
yes,
Do you?
yep. So I recently switched. I've done the last 2 books I've done entirely on the iPad Pro, which has totally changed my life. It's really, really good tool because it's basically drawing anywhere but digitally, and the pencil is very responsive and it feels just like a pencil. So yeah, that's been a really big, and it's like allowed me to get away from my desk and not have to work at a desk all the time, so I can go out to cafes, I can go to co-working spaces and feel a lot more like a human in the world. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's I do everything digitally now.
Oh, so you would use Procreate or something like
Yes,
that?
I
or-
did one book in Procreate. I really liked it, but they only let you open 1 page at a time. So that's really tedious if you've got to sample colours from a previous page that you've been working on. So I've changed to another one, which is a Japanese software called Clip Studio Paint, and it's amazing. It's very full-featured. So yeah, that's been really good.
And how about you, Giselle? How do you work? What I'm always like amazed at is that I already know the answer to this, which is I'm going to give myself away. I know that you say you work digitally, but so much of your work looks like it's kind of hand drawn in watercolors. Or how do you go about that particular form of magic? See, I'm like an analog kind of a person, so this is why.
It's because I really wish that I could draw with pen and ink, but I'm just terrible at it. I keep trying, but I just I have like a mind freeze thing. It's to do with if I have a bit of paper in front of me, and it's like I can't get over the fact that I spent $5 on that one bit of paper. And so I just I tighten up, and I can't draw for nuts. So I'm basically trying to do that, but on a screen, because I know I've got an undo button and I can use it as many times as I like. And so with that freedom, I relax, and I draw so much better. I draw so much funnier when I'm relaxed. So yeah.
Yeah,
so
no, because that is the magic of your work, that it does all look so handmade and spontaneous, and yeah.
Yeah, it's
and
just my way of kind of getting away with doing all my work in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But so I basically went through like every Carl T. Webster brush in Photoshop and found like 3 that mimicked the style I wanted. And if I ever lose them, I'm going to have like a sort of like a big style evolution. And I'll pretend like it was on purpose.
Yeah. And how did you go about, how was the genesis of, your incredibly distinctive characters with their, very cool eyes and their big heads and their little sticky eye ears? I mean, did that take you a while to come to or is that the particular style of drawing, or is that sort of your natural way of drawing?
No, it came after me realizing that I couldn't draw people. I'd been avoiding people for years and years, but about the point where I decided that I would have a crack at becoming a illustrator professionally, I thought I can't do that unless I figure out how to draw people in some kind of a way. So I spent a lot of time looking at like artists I admired and how they draw people, and sort of, I don't know, realised that I could get away with a lot more sort of like abstraction and stuff. The like giant noodly ears were an accident. But I like using big round eyes because they're it's easy to make the kind of expressions I want to make.
Yeah, and your most recent book with Courtney Sena Meredith about the butterflies also have your distinctive eyes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was really because butterfly eyes, if you make them bigger, actually really creepy. Nobody wants to see that, especially not a preschooler. So the entomologists at the museum who had to approve everything to make sure that the species I was drawing did look like the right species and stuff, they were fine with that as a bit of artistic license. So the biggest one was when it was actually at like a live drawing event after the book. It was like at the book launch, and I was drawing for the kids, and I drew a caterpillar, and I gave it eyes, and this woman came in and took the microphone away and said, "Caterpillars don't have eyes," and then left. But otherwise, I think I got away with it.
Should have given it a great big human mouth as well.
How about you, Roger? You obviously you started your comics career in the 80s, so you must have had the entire genesis, like working from in an analog space and then transitioning over to a digital space. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I drawing on computers wasn't a thing when I started, because I'm from the 80s. I'm Roger Langridge from the 80s, everybody. It was. I was doing a lot of illustration work in the 90s, and it was taking me a long time, especially when it was in color, because I would have to do everything in watercolor, and I'm terrible at it. And so I bought a computer just to speed that up, so I wasn't spending all day, every day, doing stuff that wasn't very interesting. And I found that initially I used it for coloring, I found more and more that there were things that I could do with the computer that didn't sort of compromise the hand-drawn look of my actual drawings. The colouring was a big thing, but there was other things as well. I could add grey tones and things. I could repeat things, or I could manipulate the pencils in Photoshop so I could fix proportions when I got those wrong. And so I sort of gradually went to the dark side, And now, it's about what you were saying about feeling natural when you're drawing. For me, it's the other way around. I feel more natural when I'm drawing on paper, but I can now do the penciling side on paper, and I can do that quite small, so I can work anywhere. And I can ink it digitally and color it digitally, which gives me the control and the undo button, the famous undo button that everybody craves. I've got to a position where I'm sort of comfortable doing either now, although I still don't enjoy doing the entire thing digitally. There's something, I need to have some analog element to really feel like I'm doing it properly somehow. I think that's just because I'm from the 80s.
I was also interested in about did you want to talk about your process, Ant, actually? Do you want to talk about how, because I know you kind of combine a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, just very briefly. Yeah, I'm kind of like Roger in that when I started doing comics, it was all pen and brush and ink, and I've had great difficulty going digital. I wasn't fully committed to the idea of going fully digital anyway, which was good because I just can't. So I color digitally. When it comes to inking, I can't do it. I've tried different tablets. It just doesn't look right, and it doesn't.
You tried an
feel
iPad
right.
Pro?
I haven't.
Sponsorship deals.
We could blog about it. No, I haven't. That maybe that would be my third attempt at going digital. But I think I don't know. I'll probably just stick with paper just because I actually love it. Like inking digitally, the results might be okay, but I don't love it. Like I did a piece recently, a really big A2 piece with a brush and ink, and it was just I just really like the process. Yeah.
And you have beautiful brushwork as well. I mean,
Well,
you've just got your complete master of the brush and the ink. So
I'm getting there. I'm trying to master it. It's I'm developing a look that I like. So yeah, I'm on my way.
Good. good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I'm also interested. I was just thinking. Definitely, at least 3 out of the 4. And Roger, you can correct me if you're wrong. Correct me. You are long, Roger. No. That you have environmental concerns within your comics. Katie, obviously, there is a really strong environmental message in Unicorn Cove. That's the right name, isn't it? Terrible. Acorn
Very
Cove.
close.
There we go. And obviously, Giselle, you are often addressing really pressing environmental concerns, and you've done lots of travel to the subantarctic islands and places like that. And your book as well has got quite a strong kind of cautionary environmental message. I mean, do you feel like this is a really important, urgent message that you need to convey to children, or what led you to?
Well, for me, I wanted to sort of facilitate discussion between parents and children, not necessarily tell children this is what's happening, this is bad. It's kind of more like just opening them up to these ideas, and maybe also because my stories are sort of more like the most important thing is the character and the character arc through them, and a kind of a young person learning their own strength and things. So for me, it was more about maybe making a message of confidence and hope, and maybe providing an example of a story for children where that shows them that they have the strength to stand up to people who have not done a very good job of protecting this planet so far, and that their voice is important, their desire to protect is important, and they're capable of it, and they have the strength to do that. So that's kind of what I wanted to come across in mine, rather than it being too sort of I didn't want it to feel bleak or anything like that. And I think and just having the wonder of nature in it as well, just a natural part of how amazing nature is. It's really cool, and I think that's really important too. Yeah, definitely.
Did you have when you were writing Acorn Cove, did you have a sort of a place in mind? It seems very much like this utopia, which the whole ecosystem has been unbalanced. And was there a particular place, or is it an invented place?
It is fictional, but it's definitely based on places that I went a lot when I was a child. So there's the bays around Kaikoura. We visited quite a lot when I was young, and there's lots of little sort of batch communities all up the eastern coast of the South Island. So it's quite definitely was based on those places that were just these really very small but independent kind of communities of people who've been living there for a long time. So I think out of all of them, Acorn Cove is probably the most sort of New Zealand sort of inspired, but it is still kind of a fantasy setting.
And what about you, Giselle? Can you talk a little bit about your environmental comics work?
Yes. So a lot of it is job stuff, which is really cool. I love doing that for work. So I do get commissioned to do environmental comics. I can't remember what I put up there, but there's things that I've done for Auckland Zoo and the School Journal, for example. And they're totally non-fiction, and usually there's supposed to be some kind of outcome in terms of awareness of a big issue and what can be done about that or whatever. But that can be really, really bleak, like Katie said. So I also want to focus a lot on just how awesome stuff is, because I feel like that's the best way in, and that is what is exciting and cool, and that's why people should care about things happening, is because stuff's amazing and get excited. And it makes it a lot easier to write about too. I love writing about that stuff, because that's what I just want to just sort of jump up and down and be like, have you seen the albatross? So yeah, but it's about making a message at the end about we can protect these things, we can change things for the better and all that. But yeah, ultimately giving hope, making it seem really possible. And also, I figure that if they can, like, all the stuff that they advertise on TV, because they target it to kids, because kids are influencing their parents so much more often than the other way around. If it can work for biscuits, I don't know, surely it can work for like pollution and, you know, plastics use and, you know, how often you go out in the car or whatever, yeah, so.
Roger, now's your time to reveal your climate change comic that you've written.
Yeah, no, I'm wasting my life. No, I've sort of recently been trying to do sort of slightly more socially aware things. I did a book called Criminy recently, which was sort of, I guess, more about political things and environmental things. But yeah, I mean, that's still on my list. I should get round to it one day.
I mean, I suppose the question always is with, you know, such issues is, and Katie, you talked really well to this, about, you know, the balance between, you know, trying to convey a message without being really didactic and really like, this is the message, kids, this is what you've got to believe. So, I mean, how do you go about that kind of delicate balance of, yeah?
I don't know if there's a simple answer to it, but I think, you know, my sort of guiding principle for that sort of thing is to ask questions rather than to give answers, because I think that the point is to initiate a dialogue, like you were saying. That seems to be the best way to go about it. It seems a bit arrogant to assume you've got the answers anyway. But to get people talking about things,
we're from the 80s, we screwed everything up.
Yeah. So yeah, just get people talking. I think that's the thing to do.
Yeah. What about you, Ant? How is your? I kind of viewed Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas as having quite a strong environmental parable.
Yeah, yes, it does. And that was Helen. When she was married, she had other problems to deal with, not the environment. So when she became a teenager, the environmentalist angle kind of became a big thing about what she was about. And I've got two daughters, 12 and 14, and I really worry about the world that they're growing up in, and I think, oh, why have I brought them into this world? It's terrible, terrible place, and there's no, you know, what's the world going to be like when I'm dead and they're, you know, growing up, you know, and being adults. And so I found it really interesting working on the book, and that I kind of, I worry about the things that we do to save the environment, and I worry that it's not enough. And I've heard people writing about the way that we have to save the world is like to completely transform society and, you know, dismantle capitalism and, you know, destroy the whole system that we operate under, and it would be mammoth to do such a thing. And so the question that was kind of posed in Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas was about how far are we willing to go to, you know, to save the world. And at the beginning, she's not really able to kind of commit to too much, and she has to go through this journey to find out how far she's willing to go. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting topic to tackle, and it was a young adult book, and it was kind of like a good, a meaty subject that I think that audience can deal with and think about.
Yeah. And you, like Giselle, you were working with Helene Wong. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, that's sort of more in the social issues of being a Chinese New Zealander. Yeah.
And what was it called? We call it the Quiet Achievers, but it was part of the Being Chinese in Aotearoa photographic exhibition. And the comic part of that exhibition is, I've lost my bearings. It might be upstairs, one level, maybe in the Turnbull something. Turnbull. The Turnbull Gallery. So it's in the room upstairs if you want to have a look at it later. The books themselves are not here. Yeah, but that was a really interesting project because I'm only recently I've kind of ignored being Chinese for ages. It was just something I wasn't really that interested in dealing with as a subject, and it was a chance to explore the contribution that Chinese people have had. It was quite focused on Auckland, so we were trying to break stereotypes. And we were trying to present stories that people didn't know about and real characters that people didn't know about, and how they had affected Auckland in the past as well as in the present.
Great. And I mean, quite often your characters are in your book, like in Katie's book, they're often, lesbian characters or queer characters. Often your characters are Chinese, so it's sort of more, you present them rather than saying this is a story about
I guess
what it's like to be Chinese or New Zealander or something like that.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. They quite often are Chinese, and it feels natural to do it. It's not like a conscious thing of I have to represent Chinese characters in comics, but it's me, so it just goes out into my art. It just feels natural. Yeah.
How are we going for time? Is it question time? Oh, yeah, excellent. So is it 1:37, is it? 1:27. Okay. I'm going to flick through here. I did have like a question that I was going to ask at the very beginning. Have any of you guys got tattoos? No? If you were to, if you were to get a children's cartoon character tattooed on you, which one would it be? Is that like a really silly question? It is, isn't it? That was one that I was meant to do as a warm-up.
I'll need to think about it. I'll pass to you, Roger, in case you have a quicker mind.
I don't know if I'd have the character, but I'd have Popeye anchors tattooed on my forearms.
I would get one of the Harifatnas from the Moomins.
I don't know, maybe a little Fungus the Boogeyman.
I'm still stumped. I don't know. I'm terrible at being put on the spot, and I don't know. Paul Pope is an artist I love. Maybe one of his kind of inky, brushy things. Maybe.
Yeah. No. Well, I think that it's actually it's a really, really difficult decision for people who haven't yet.
That's why I don't have a tattoo.
Yeah. Well, that's me too. Yeah. I'm only asking this question because somebody just asked me before, when are you going to get your tattoos, Sarah? And I'm like, soon. Katie, would you consider writing a book that was more, aimed for an adult audience?
Yeah, I mean, I do have some ideas that are kind of fermenting in the pot at the moment. So it's not something I've got any immediate plans for, but it's like if the right story comes along and it's like actually this would be better served with an older audience and this is kind of just naturally where it seems to be going, then I think that would be something really cool.
Yeah. And do you you said that you were entirely self-taught as well. That was kind of really interesting.
Yeah, I went to UC and majored in Japanese and English, and then worked for a web design company for 4 years, and just was doing webcomics on the side. And eventually the scales just kind of tipped towards, I guess I'm an illustrator now. and so, yeah, just a gradual process. Yeah.
And what is it like out there in the big... Roger, you can also talk to this question. What is it like, kind of dealing with the North American market and the whole kind of comics? Do you go to lots of Comic-Cons? Do you get invited to, literary festivals or Comic-Cons overseas?
My publisher's been really great with helping me arrange these kinds of things. So last year I did TCAF and VanCAF in Canada, which were really wonderful independent comic festivals, and it's really amazing because you do like I really appreciate so much about New Zealand as an artist, our free healthcare and kind of reasonably good like social security, and like not having a huge student loan. And in Christchurch, the cost of living isn't quite as astronomical as it is in Wellington and Auckland. So overall, the conditions are very ripe for being an illustrator compared to other places where you do have to really think about how you're going to like take care of yourself. But on the flip side of that, you are very far away from a lot of the people who read your work. And so you can sometimes feel a bit like, obviously, events like this are wonderful because it's just like, oh, actually getting to meet people who've read it and connected with it rather than just getting emails. It's like really, really nice to see people and especially see children in person. So TCAP was like that, but a full day. It was really exhausting, but wonderful. So it's when I do get to go, it's a wonderful experience.
Have you ever had anybody cosplay any of your characters?
Yes, there was a Lana from Echo Cove here earlier this morning. She was super cute, and I was so happy. Yeah.
Great. And I mean, what about you, Roger? Like I say, because you, as you say, you are from the 80s, and so you could not have the same career. Well, you do, but at the time, you could not have the same career as Katie. Katie's managed to have this international career. And you too, Ant, as well. I mean, your books are published internationally, but you had to leave in order to, establish all of those contacts. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I did. I left, I established some contacts. I think, these days, I could probably just move back here if it came to that and carry on doing what I'm doing. Probably spend less on living as well. So, there are all sorts of reasons for doing it. But my life is in London now. That's where my wife and I met. So it's neutral territory for us. And my kids are in school, so it would be very disruptive to do that. So, but yeah, I mean, although, the comic industry is less centralized now than it was when I moved there as well. It all used to be in London, and now it's all over the place. It's moved out to Oxford. There's mainstream publishers who are all over the place as well. Yeah, I'm not very good at this whole sort of networking thing and making contacts, and I'm very much playing it by the seat of my pants. So yeah, I don't know if I've got actually a constructive answer to your question, to be honest. I just sort of keep doing what I'm doing and hope for the best, really.
Okay, I think it must be question time now. So I'm going to hand it over to the floor. Does anybody have anything they want to ask? We've got roving microphones, so whoever the roving microphone person gets to first.
And an awesome shirt. Yeah. My question is, we've mentioned accessible medium as what comics are, but it's not accessible to everyone. The visually impaired, it's a bit of a difficult medium for them. What about converting your artwork into an audio scape, such as on the radio, where they used to do the old radio dramas that we used to have in the 80s. So have you ever thought of the other ways of actually communicating your art?
Well, I did actually do a radio writing course a few years ago, because I'm interested. I listen to a lot of radio. The BBC is really good for they keep doing lots of drama and comedy. It's still a vital thing over there. But it is a different medium, and it's not what I do. I've got no objection to actually working in radio at some point. I'd like to do it because I do love that stuff, but it would probably have to be something that was conceived for that medium rather than transposing something that I'm already doing to radio. Because when you're creating something for the comics medium, the visual aspect is sort of an integral part of it, and to separate them seems... I mean, I have heard adaptations of comics on the radio, and there seems to be, perhaps it's just because I'm familiar with the original source material, but there does seem to be something missing from it. Whereas when something's been created specifically for the radio, and they're taking full advantage of the medium in that way, it's its own thing, its own complete thing. That's my take on it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I used to go to bookshop when I have problems. When I feel down, I go to children's section to read children's book. But recent years, I found there's a trend. I sometimes got so depressed or even cry by certain children's book. I couldn't believe they write story like this, and I don't mean to offend. There seems to be a trend sort of correlate because the comic so popular correlate with the children's ability, attention span lower, and writing ability. It's like they don't really read a lot of words, and then also they don't really bother writing well because they don't practice as much as we do in old days. And another thing is how real do we really want them to know, say children and youth, young audience, because youth depression is a problem. I see kids are like, they think the world is going to end. Like we have some negative thoughts, passive thought, and they sometimes got influenced. For me, it's like, okay, the real world is out there. Do we want to protect them to a certain age? Say, maybe you don't need to know all this problem yet. Wait till you are capable of dealing with it a bit better. And yeah, just like a reality show. Like, do we really want them? Like how real do you want them to be? And for youth one, sometimes I see some very offensive language, and I wonder whether there is some kind of censorship needed for some teen, comic stuff, or you think just let market decide, and the publishing company they will have self-censorship or they will decide what's good to do. So sort of children and youth, I just wonder, what's your thought?
I think it is really important for publishers to be responsible about what they're publishing and making sure that they are presenting things in ways that aren't harmful. But I think that by completely protecting children from serious issues, you're not really doing them any favors. It's better to explore these issues in a way that is thoughtful and considerate and comes from a really caring place, which I think a lot of graphic novels do, and they come from places of they're written by someone who wants to give young readers the tools to deal with depression. If you never talk about depression, they're not going to know what it is when it happens to them. I think it's better to have a well written and a really compassionate comic that is honest and shows them what that is like, but then gives them the next step, gives them the means and the tools and the kind of voice for what they're experiencing. I think so. I actually think comics are really important for doing that because they're such an empathetic medium. Like, you read it, there's so much you can you don't have to spell everything out. You can leave it unsaid because you can just say it with the expression. You can say it with the setting. You can say it with the artwork. You don't have to make it too explicit, so you can actually handle more sensitive and more delicate topics in a really responsible way. So I think they're really good for that, actually.
Hi, I just want to go back to that original question about kids, whether there are more comics for kids. I'm, as the president and sole member of the Children's Right Comics movement, I think you're all completely wrong. When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, the sheer volume of comics that kids got through was just kilos and kilos and kilos of badly printed, cheap paper, rubbish comics that were in every single newsagent throughout the country. And I just don't see kids reading that volume of comics anymore. And I don't see the sort of product that was available then is really out there now. I think possibly awareness of children's comics might be higher amongst the sort of literate middle classes, but that mass working class product seems to have vanished. So I'm not convinced that children's comics are actually in very good shape, I'm afraid.
I don't know. You might be right. Yeah, I mean, I don't, to be honest, I don't think that reading graphic novels is a preserve for the middle classes. I'm sure that there's plenty of working class families that read loads of comics.
Also,
It's a different kind of. I mean, what you were saying about there being tons and tons of comics being produced, a lot of them were really bad, and I think the quality is a lot higher now overall. I mean, obviously there's good and bad, but I don't think that children are more poorly served now, even if they're not reading the same quantities. They're probably what they are reading is probably a lot better. Or online, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also libraries are massive supporters of comics, and they're purchasing really good quality graphic novels that are produced by Scholastic and lots of other producers that are doing a lot of different work. And so I think it's actually more accessible than it was, in the sense that they don't have to go and buy a bunch of paper that's got comics printed. They can just get a book out from the library, and it's got a beautiful hardcover, and it's like fully compiled in one tome, so they can just read all the ones. Like all the Tintins are still available, all these other ones from you know that have been collected and republished, all available in libraries still. So yeah.
Also, I'd just add that a lot of the old stuff is now being collected in books, which wasn't available in my day. You know, a lot of classics that were out of print for years are now available. They're now there to read. So.
Hi. Are graphic books and comic books different? And if they are, what makes them different?
I think, on its most fundamental level, graphic novels are just fat comics. I mean, we may as well just call them fat comics. I think it's a question of intent, possibly, that the graphic novel market tends not to be written with disposable reading in mind. It tends to be written for posterity more. But the sort of the serial comics market has caught up with that, and they tend to be written now to be collected as graphic novels anyway. I think there's sort of the two ends of it, of the children's comic thing, the disposable stuff and the graphic novel stuff, are sort of joining in the middle, and essentially becoming different ways of doing the same thing, I think.
I reckon like graphic novels are just comics. I feel like comics is that's the medium, and graphic novels are just a type like within that, because I mean there are a lot of things that get called graphic novels which are just not. I mean they're non-fiction, or they're memoir, or they're in actually a completely different format, but for some reason graphic novels is something that is somehow elevated or something. But I reckon they're all just
How
comics.
many people have been asked to write a one-page graphic novel? I have.
Somebody asked me to do a graphic novel in 4 days.
I'm just wondering if the panelists could suggest any good, maybe online resources for finding out about new releases, or finding out more about just the comics that are in the shops. Because as a parent, I find it really hard, once you've kind of gone through what's in the children's section, to figure out what else might be appropriate or not, because everything looks really accessible to kids, and it's hard to sometimes distinguish what might be, what might be appropriate or not. But it would just be great to be able to kind of keep an eye on what's coming out and read people's reviews. Any suggestions?
It's a New York-based one, but you'll find they do have lots of international books. But the Junior Library Guild is a really nicely curated catalogue of younger comics done by different age groups, and they select really they actually read them before they put them in the catalogue, so it is quite good. But that's more American, so I'm not sure if you guys would know of more Kiwi ones.
I also have to put a plug in for my local Karori library, which the children's comics were curated by Monty over here.
Ooh.
And there's a really fantastic selection, but you've already, is this what you're talking about, having gone to the library and then gone through all of those? But yeah, library's excellent, yeah. One last question, and then it's time for us to wrap up. Yeah.
Kia ora. I was really delighted to see Te Tiriti o Waitangi in the school journal recently. And once upon a time, lots of artworks and all the rest used to appear in that, and that got it into schools and gave a place for people. But I'm interested in how much cartoonists, comic artists now have to choose between love of what they're doing and doing something because it makes money. And whether there are actually, choices that people do have to make. Oh, I'm going to do this because there's a market for it, whether it's environmental comics for Forest and Bird or something, like what sort of drives people and where do people sort of find that thing of like, to hell with the money, I'm just going to do what I will love, or this has got a commercial market and I'm going to jump into that thing.
I don't really find that I have to choose. I honestly don't think that there's a really difficult decision there. I guess that's not going to be the same for everyone. I find I'm really lucky in that what I want to do, there actually is a market for it. And like the school journal in particular has been fantastic in recent years it's kind of the history of the school journal anyway, is picking up new people and giving them all these amazing experiences working for the journal, artists, writers, poets, everything, and it's like a fantastic training ground. But they've got behind comics like 100%, which is awesome, and that's how Toby Morris's treaty comic ended up there, and I got to do one on the Subantarctics, and like Jim Yoshioka did an amazing one on her mixed heritage and what that's like in New Zealand and stuff. Because it is a fantastic medium for education. And so, yeah, I think most of what you want to do, you can find someone to pay you for it somehow. Yeah.
I think it's something that every artist in every field has to juggle and come to their own sort of come to terms with on their own terms. Do something for the money and then do something for yourself, and just try to get the balance right. And it's a constant sort of for me anyway, it's a constant process of adjustment and never quite getting it right. But trying to find that balance, trying to find the equilibrium.
All right. I think we should probably leave it there. I'm really sorry, guys. These conversations are super interesting, but alas, we have a full program of more panel discussions taking place in this very room now. So I just want to say a huge thank you to this panel. I found it really, really interesting, and I can't wait to hopefully talk to you guys more after this out in the foyer. And remember, there are going to be signings happening from all of these wonderful artists and writers outside as well. A very small token of the library's appreciation for all of these panelists, and a huge round of applause. Thank you.